All right, folks, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about cartridges. This isn't going to be really in depth, but to basically get the word out there about cartridge types and some basic terminology. Obviously, one of the things that a pet peeve to anyone that shoots or is familiar with guns is when people refer to what we have here on the table as bullets. Um, Bullet is literally the part that exits the loaded cartridge. So if I have, this cartridge right here, this is a loaded cartridge or a round. We could call it ammo. We could call it a number of things, but this is not a bullet, okay? This right here at the top is a bullet. The bullet is simply the part that comes out of the end of the barrel. Now, bullets come in all shapes and sizes. They don't all look like this. They're not all pointed. But again, this is a bullet. It's the only part that exits the front end of the gun. Now, I want to make it, clear that, what we're trying to do here really is just get some basic terminology out. So the first thing I want to talk about really is metallic cartridges. Basically, cartridges come in several different styles and types, and ultimately what we have is a series of rifle cartridges here. But what I'm really talking about is the type of case. So this is a rimmed case. Okay, if we look at this cartridge itself, there is a rim around the edge. That rim is what the extractor grabs a hold of to yank the shell out of the chamber. Okay, so we have what we call rimmed cases. This case right here is 307 Winchester. This is a semi-rimmed case. Now this is pretty rare, really, as cases go. But basically, if I slide the rule down, you can see that there is a rim, although it's really small. Compared to the other case, which was a 303 British, the rim is pretty pronounced, okay? But if we look at this case, not only is there a slight rim extending past the case, but there's also this groove. This is what's called the extractor groove. And the extractor, again, hooks in here and drags the cartridge out of the chamber. Now, there has to be a groove here because the rim is really so small that if not, it would simply slip off, right? So we have a rimmed case. We have a semi-rimmed case. The next style of cartridge really is what we call rimless. This has a large extractor groove, and if we take a scale and place it beside it, we can see that the head of the case, the extractor portion or rim, if you want to call it that, does not extend beyond the outside of the body of the case. Next in line, we have what's called a rebated rim. In this case, the rim is not only not larger than the case, but you can see here with a little bit of light passing through that it's actually smaller than the outside of the case. This happens to be a 450 Bushmaster cartridge. There's some pistol cartridges. 50 Action Express comes to mind. I'm sure there's a pile others. But basically, this is a type of cartridge that's really designed so that it can be fired in a gun that has a bolt face that is smaller than what the weapon was probably originally intended to handle. Or I said that wrong, but basically the cartridge is larger than what the weapon was intended to handle. So the case has been made to fit on an existing bolt face. In this case here, I believe this case head fits the 7.62 by 39 bolt face of an AR-15 type cartridge. And that's really where it was what it was intended to be fired in. But basically, we have, again, so far, rimmed, semi-rimmed, rimless, rebated rim, and then finally we get to what we call a belted case. This cartridge actually has what's called a belt around the base of it. Belted cases were, popular at one time. Large Magnum type cases were made with a belt. And the belt really is for what we call headspace. I'll talk headspace specifically in another video. But essentially, the rim itself is the same size thereabouts, within a few thousandths, as the belt. It does extend past the case itself. You can see a slight gap in there, hopefully a little bit of light with the camera, but ultimately it's the same as the outside. So we have rimmed, which is really common, semi-rimmed, which is not so common. We have rimless, which again is extremely common, rebated rim, not so common, and then belted, which is again reasonably common. Okay. Now, in addition to the type of case that we have here, it's worth noting that there are some cases that are straight. This is, again, 450 Bushmaster is what's called a straight-walled case. Technically, there's some taper to it, so if I take the calipers and put it on here, I have essentially around the brass right here, I have roughly 478. And at the other end, down near the base, I have, again, roughly 489 at that point. The case tapers slightly, but it is considered a straight case. Another example of a straight case would be, like your 357 Magnum, revolver rounds in general are typically straight case. So this is a rimmed case, and again, the case type is straight. The rest of these cases are what we call bottleneck. They neck down like a Pepsi bottle would, or a Coke bottle or something. And again, they refer to as bottleneck cases. A bottleneck case has what's called a shoulder. This 303 British, the shoulder is not very pronounced really at all. The 308 Winchester has a more pronounced shoulder. And the 300 Winchester Magnum, again, this cartridge has actually been fire formed and then neck sized, topic for another video. But essentially, the shoulder is very, very sharp because it's actually been blown out to the dimensions of the chamber, and this case has been reloaded, where the other two are factory new ammunition. If we take a look at, what kind of goes on inside the case, we have an example here laid out of some components. So again, loaded cartridge on the bottom, and this is the 303 British. This is the empty casing. It's what we call the brass. This is actually made from brass, although not all brass is brass. The term brass really just refers to, not necessarily what it's made from, but it refers to this empty casing. Some cartridges have steel cases. Some are aluminum, and the vast majority are actually brass. So this is the empty shell casing. This holds the primer. The primer can be seen on the end. This is a center fire cartridge. So the firing pin strikes the center of the case. This primer is actually staked in place. You can see three tiny little marks on there. And additionally, it has an adhesive. This is German military ammunition. Other cartridges are rim fire. And this is the, little tiny 22 long rifle. There is no primer in the middle. So basically the cartridge has priming material in the rim. And I've got an older case that's just bigger. This is an ancient rimfire case, but it's just easier to see on camera. So essentially, if you look at the way the rim is kind of formed and rolled up, if I roll my finger, this part of my finger, I can't make my knuckle go straight, but this part of my finger here would be equivalent to the back of the case, and my knuckle would kind of be the rim. So if you imagine the gap inside here as, in a cross section, there'd be a slight amount of space inside this brass lip where it's rolled up. There's priming mixture inside of there, and the firing pin would strike the very edge of the case, create a dent on the rim, and then that's what would cause it to fire. Okay. We'll talk more about that in maybe another video on reloading and really how that stuff works. But for now, again, this is the brass. Okay. Additionally, we have, of course, the bullet, which is the part that exits the chamber. And then I have this cutaway, which I don't think I can really pick up without dropping it, but I'm going to try it because why the heck not? If I can get this up close enough to the camera. This is a 303 British case that I cut in half. Now, this particular case, there's no pathway between what's called the primer, which we can see right here, and the gunpowder. It's just the way that it happened to get cut. The width of the cutoff wheel removed that cap, that space. But you can see here on another case where there actually is what's called a flash hole that would be located inside of there. Okay. Now, this case I'm holding here is what we call boxer primed. This is the typical type of ammunition you would find in the United States. This is reloadable because a tool can simply push through the center and knock the primer out the bottom. Literally, if there was a hole in here, the tool could come through and literally shove the primer out of the bottom of the case. This particular cartridge is the same brass that we had here, and this was German ammo, and this is what we call Berdan primed. And there are actually two tiny little flash holes down inside the case, and I know I can't see it on camera. But when this was cut in half, it was cut between the flash holes, and again, that's why you don't see the hole going through the middle. But under normal circumstances, there are either two small flash holes or one centrally located flash hole between the primer and the gunpowder, and that's where the flash goes to ignite the gunpowder. So if I remove the bullet itself, to just take this out, just to set it aside, and then remove the primer so you can kind of see what it looks like. The primer itself, I don't drop this, the primer itself is a small cup. Okay, it has what's called an anvil inside of it. And that anvil, basically, when it's inserted into the case, provides resistance for the firing pin to strike. I got to set this down. So basically, the firing pin would come in on the back side and hit this on the center, and it would crush the priming mixture, which is actually an explosive. It's a percussion explosive, and it would literally crush it. There you go. I just dropped it. It would literally crush the priming mixture between the cup and the anvil, and that would cause a flash that would go through the flash hole and ultimately begin burning the gunpowder. Now, this gunpowder is a stick-type powder. This isn't powder from this cartridge. I just dumped some gunpowder in for demonstration purposes. There's a lot of different types of powder. They don't all look like this. Some are little spheres, some are flattened spheres, some are bigger, they look like mechanical pencil leads cut off. Some are larger, some are smaller. You get the point. Topic for another video. But ultimately, the gunpowder itself is the part that burns, okay? The primer detonates, the powder burns, and that builds up pressure, and that pressure forces the bullet out of the barrel, okay? So essentially, the common types of cartridges you would see are, again, rimmed, rimless, and belted. Even for pistols, handguns, this would be the same case. You have bottleneck cartridges, again, that neck down. Some pistol cartridges are, in fact, bottlenecked. Majority aren't, but some are. And then you have straight-walled cases, like the 450 Bushmaster or, 45 automatic, 357 Magnum, 9mm, so on and so forth. They're all straight-walled cases. Okay. So that's really it for the common parts of a metallic case. Other than, basic case nomenclature. So if I take the empty here, note that the case has a body, okay? This one has a neck, they all have a neck, I guess, which is just the end where the bullet goes. The opening itself would be the mouth of the case. This has a shoulder, but again, not all do. There is either a rim or a belt of some sort, although when we say rimless, it doesn't mean that there's literally no rim. This pinfire case, ancient again, is truly rimless. Okay, there's no rim. But again, rimless simply means that the rim is not extending beyond the diameter of the body, okay, for extraction. So there's always a rim of some sort. You have a primer, which is in the center of the case for the most part. If it is, again, it's like the 22 rimfire, there's no primer per se, but really the rim of the case is a primer in and of itself, because this priming mixture spun out on the inside, and the rim acts as its own anvil surface. Okay. Additionally, again, you have the same parts on a regular case. Now, the entire end of the case here, really, there's a thicker portion. If we look at the cross section, again, without dumping the gunpowder, hopefully, you can see that the case is pretty thin walled, and it does start to get thicker down at the bottom. So the thicker section, really, from maybe my finger to the end of where the primer goes in, is called the head of the case. Okay, so again, we have a mouth, we have a neck, we have a body where my fingers are, we have a head, we have a rim. The primer pocket, the flash hole is not visible here. Again, just the way it got cut, it's just not visible, but there is a flash hole. So those are the common parts of a metallic cartridge case. For shot shells, I don't know as much about shot shells, quite frankly, as probably a lot of people do. I've never really reloaded them. But usually these are referred to as shells, okay? It's still ammo. This is still a cartridge, technically. But a lot of people will refer to, these as metallic. These are metallic cartridges. They might refer to these as cartridges, or the empty hull as brass. You never really refer to the empty shotgun shell as brass. It's called a hull, okay? Essentially what you have is a brass head for strength, just to take the pressure. You have a primer, just the same. The shot shell is typically crimped shut, and I have a couple here that I've cut apart. This was from a slug, so this actually has a roll type crimp, and the slug will push through that, okay? But typically for shot, and I have some buckshot here, the end of the case is actually crimped. Inside, the case head, you can see where there's another layer of plastic in there, and of course the brass. There's both high base, which is what this is. There's other cases where the brass is shorter for lower pressure cartridges, which would be called a low base brass. But again, you can see where the primer is and the hole in the center for the flash. What you have inside of a shotgun shell is, in fact, shot. So shot comes in all kinds of different sizes for different purposes. But basically, the bigger the number, the smaller the shot. So this is 7.5, which is kind of a common shot maybe for if you're going partridge hunting or something like that, or even just shooting some clay pigeons kind of in the backyard. Number 12 shot would be more like dust compared to this. And, number 3 shot would be, or 4 shot would be larger. There's also BBT and a whole bunch of other sizes. And again, I'm not an expert on shotgun shells, but keep in mind that it is, in fact, a multitude of, quote unquote, bullets that come out of it. This other shell here has what we call buckshot. This is just simply larger shot sizes. And again, shotguns are, a different animal entirely, but they do have some common parts. This cartridge here, again, has what's called a slug. That's really the closest you'd have to a bullet, if you will. And there are different types of slugs as well. This is full bore diameter. Some are smaller. They have what's called a sabot. It's like a plastic insert that holds a smaller shell inside. Now, the shotgun shell obviously has gunpowder. I don't have the gunpowder here. When I cut this apart, I just kind of dumped it out. But the gunpowder would be held inside here, and this part is what's called a wad. So the gunpowder is captured only in the lower part of the shell, whereas in a regular rifle case, the entire casing is full of gunpowder. So it's really only the very bottom of a shotgun shell that actually has the gunpowder in it. The wad is kind of an unusual thing. Basically, the wad itself holds the shot, and it provides, if you can imagine this slip back together, and this all crushed back in. If you can imagine this all in one piece, Basically what you have is the wad itself. Again, the gunpowder pushes on the bottom here. The pressure with the shot in it will open this up, it'll uncrimp it, if you will. And the shot will pass, through here. It's easier to imagine it passing through the crimped shell. And I don't have a fired shotgun shell right here to show that wad, unrolled, if you will. But basically, the wad contains the shot as it's forced down the barrel. Once the shot exits the barrel, the wad will actually catch the wind. This will open up a little bit and the wad will fall back because of air resistance. The shot will continue to go forward. The wad serves a lot of purposes. Again, I'm not an expert on shotgun shells. I'm not an expert anyway. I'm just telling you what I know. But essentially, the wad is designed to absorb a little bit of shock. So this provides some compression in here. I can't squish it with my hand. But, without this wad, the gun would have more felt recoil. So essentially this changes the rate of acceleration as the pressure pushes forward. The shot, which has mass and therefore inertia, it allows some compression in here. And it basically means that this starts to move forward slightly before the wad does, and it accelerates at a reduced rate, and it reduces the recoil impulse to your shoulder. The plastic fins really prevent the lead shot. In this case, this is lead or steel or tungsten or bismuth or whatever you're using from rubbing down the inside of the barrel. So it's like a protective layer on the barrel. And it also means that the choke, shotguns have an end that can be restricted to squish the shot together to make it travel farther before it spreads out. This gives a shock-absorbing barrier for the choke to squeeze on, okay? So essentially, with a shotgun, you have what's called the hull, the empty part. It still has a head. It still has a primer. It still has a flash hole. It still has a, quote unquote bullet, although usually it's pellets of some size, or it could be a slug. And ultimately, there's a wad, which is not in a normal cartridge. This is actually part of the wad from the slug. So in that case, the wad really was just heavy paper packed in the bottom of the case to shove the slug along. And this one I'll pull out and show you the gunpowder because I haven't taken this one apart yet. So I saved this one for the camera. So I'm gonna pop this out of here. Try to do it without cutting myself while looking in a lens past my hands. And again, it's literally just packing material to take up the space in the shell because, quite frankly, this slug is pretty short and there would be, if I move this down, a lot of empty space inside of there. So there's wadding, different layers. I've already taken some of it out. And then again, we get down to the bottom and there's plastic. So again, shotgun shells are just far more complex, really, than a regular case. And I'm actually going to cut this down. I'm going to try to keep it on camera. I'm looking past my camera, literally my cell phone suspended by a couple of woodworking clamps on a bench. This is pretty, low tech here, folks. But we're just trying to get some knowledge out to the folks, so to speak. So I'm going to pry this up and, again, try not to cut myself or I think I got it. And I think I'm still on camera. So right there. So there's the shotgun powder. Shotgun powder and pistol powder are almost the same. In many cases, they are the same powder. And it's common for it to have like a flaky appearance to it. So as I said earlier, there's different types of powder. Different shapes, different sizes. Well, there you go. This is what's called a flake powder. And relatively speaking, it burns really, really fast. But that is a discussion for another day. So there you have it. Metallic cartridges and shotgun shells, quick overview, different types of cases, and what the parts are. Hope you enjoyed.